Today we'll be discussing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and we'll be discussing artificial sweeteners. This is Doctor vs. Comedian. I'm Dr. Asif Doja, and this is the Doctor of Laughs.
Not a real doctor.
Ali Hassan. Every episode I pick a topic for Ali from comedy and entertainment, and I question him about it. Then Ali picks a topic from medicine and health and grills me on that topic. Today we'll be discussing the new Marvel movie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And we'll be discussing the controversy surrounding artificial sweeteners. Are these two topics related, Ali?
I'm going to say you will find a way. You will find a way to relate
Well, in fact, spoiler, Ali and I actually saw a movie together, which was this movie. I was visiting Toronto.
And you drank a Diet Coke in the theater.
There we go. That's not what happened, but I could have. I certainly drank a Diet Coke around you that weekend, right? That is without a doubt something that occurred. So that's how we're connecting it. There was sugary snacks and salty snacks consumed at the movies, but Ali and I haven't seen a movie together, I don't know, probably since we saw Back to the Future, maybe. There are a few movies we saw together. We saw Back to the Future.
One of the Indiana Jones.
We saw Indiana Jones. We saw E.T., as we've talked about. These are all things we've talked about in the podcast. We saw Condor Man. Do you remember Condor Man?
Was that Michael Keaton? Who plays Condor Man?
No. You're thinking of like Birdman.
I'm thinking of Birdman. I'm mixing up two things.
This was like a very old Disney kind of superhero type thing in the late 70s, early 80s. I don't know why we saw that, but we did. Anyway, there's a couple other. We saw Superman 3 together.
I mean, beggars couldn't be choosers back then, yeah? You're going to go see a movie.
Yeah. Exactly. It was like one movie out. That was your choice. Superman 3 with Richard Pryor, if people remember that. Oh my gosh. It's not a very good movie. No. Let's all be honest here. Anyway, there's probably a few more that I'm forgetting, but...
A more entertaining thing would be the behind-the-scenes stories about Richard Pryor on Superman 3, because that was a period of his life where he was pretty much out of his mind on drugs.
Yeah, and I think he was doing a lot of stuff for the cash, right? For doing movies for the cash, like not as good movies. Though he did some stuff with Gene Wilder. Some of those movies were kind of fun, right?
Hear no evil, see no evil?
Yeah, I think we saw one of those too. I think so. I think we also saw Trading Places together, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, this is all getting off tracks because we're going to talk about a Marvel movie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, in just 1 second. Okay, Ali, let's get into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Very curious to get your thoughts on it. We haven't really talked about the movie since we saw it. We thought we'd save it for the podcast. We certainly got the feedback from our dumb kids, but we wanted to get each other's feedback for the podcast. So let's see. We'll try and avoid spoilers of what happens in the movie. We will do a spoiler alert towards the end of this section where we will talk about what happens in the movie and what this may mean for the future of the Guardians and the franchise.
I don't know how to describe my feelings about this movie without spoiling things.
Well, we can be brief. So we can, and there is something I do want to talk about, which is how this movie ended up getting made by the director, James Gunn. So let's just talk about where we left off with the Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, is this a spoiler if I'm spoiling the Infinity War, Endgame?
No, you know what? Oh my God, those aren't real fans at this point. You know, I'm not a real super fan. Exactly,
they've made billions of dollars, right? Like, if you haven't seen them, that's okay, but you can't get upset. So yeah, you can't get upset. So anyway, where we left the Guardians of the Galaxy is they were kind of hanging around with Thor for a little bit. They saved the world, but that was
as one does. Yeah,
right. But Gamora did die in Infinity War and Endgame. So it's how they're dealing with Gamora, because she did die. But then if you guys have seen Avengers Endgame, Gamora from the past also comes and joins up with them. So this is a Gamora who doesn't have the experience of knowing the Guardians and having a relationship.
It's like a fresh take on a character with amnesia.
Yeah, exactly. And so how are they dealing with that? And that's basically where the movie starts. So, yeah, okay, so why don't we talk about James Gunn before we get into the movie, Ali? Because I think this is the interesting part. So, for people who don't know, James Gunn is the director of this movie. And
The
before
entire
doing
franchise, yeah, 1, 2, and 3 he's done?
1, 2, and 3, correct. And so before he got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, he was kind of like a smaller director. He did a lot of kind of quirky humor, dark humor, horror kind of things, but was really kind of known as he had a visionary kind of director, and definitely had his own sort of thoughts on what's going on. So, he took a lot of chances, right? He cast Chris Pratt in the role. He was really only known for Parks and Recreation.
As kind of a slob, to be honest. Like, he wasn't a super fit punk superhero. You don't, his face, maybe, his, jawline, but yeah, not his body, certainly. You don't think superhero when you see him, but.
No, but I mean, he was a funny kind of scene stealer on the show. He was just, at the beginning of the show, he was just Anne's kind of, louse of a boyfriend. And then he became more and more integral to and a lot of people's favorite character on the show, I would say. And then he also cast Dave Bautista, the former professional wrestler. So he kind of had these quirky picks for things. And it really shouldn't have been a big hit because it was a C-list or D-list superhero group. I never even heard of the Guardians of the Galaxy before the first movie. Didn't know who a lot of the characters were. And then you kind of get into that movie and it's hilarious, it's touching, it's action-packed. It was great. Yeah, I think the sequel, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, was not quite as good, but it was still a fun movie. It was worth seeing, and nice seeing some of the other characters in it. And so, but then all wasn't positive then for James Gunn. Hey, Ali?
No, I wouldn't say so. And this is basically a conversation, dancing around this idea of cancel culture as well. It's a very interesting kind of case study. If you even, you leave this Marvel universe, it's just a case study in sort of society. And it's interesting because basically James Gunn had some tweets. These tweets were about rape and pedophilia. These were his idea of jokes at the time. And what I never understood is that there were some conservative commentators, right? Mike Cernovich, his name comes up, who called for his firing. What do you think the agenda was there? What did James Gunn do to upset conservative commentators that they would spend their time going after him?
Good point. So first of all, these are very old tweets because this call for him to be fired was in 2018.
Right, but the tweets were like at the beginning of Twitter.
Yeah, I think they were in 2008 around. I may be wrong about the time, but it was quite a long time ago when he was just kind of starting out. And he even admits he thought he was being controversial and edgy, and he realizes these were like not appropriate. And he thought he was making jokes that were outrageous and taboo. And he's developed and matured as a human being. And he's like, that's not funny. And I don't think that those are very funny. But so he is very left-wing, James Gunn. I would say he has very similar sensibilities. Him and Dave Bautista, who plays Drax in the movie, very, very left-wing kind of guys, spoke out a lot against Trump and have their own opinions. Chris Pratt, I'm not quite sure where he falls. He's definitely a very Christian person, but I'm not quite sure where he falls on right-wing versus left-wing.
Wherever he falls, Chris Pratt, I would have said that's not really relevant, but it actually is because Chris Pratt became a huge defender of James Gunn.
So this is, I think, the key. So the right-wing kind of pundits, it was like Mike Cernovich and some of these other guys, super right-wing people. They're like, our agenda, which they didn't publicize that they want, but they obviously want to get James Gunn fired from Disney because it's Disney and Marvel who are his employers. And the Walt Disney Studio chairman, Alan Horn, said, yep, these are offensive statements. They're indefensible, inconsistent with their values. We've severed our relationship with him just based on these tweets. So I think when you're thinking about cancel culture, Ali, we have to think about who is doing the canceling. And what is their agenda? Are they really offended? These guys weren't offended by the jokes, these right-wing pundits who were coming out against James Gunn. Were the jokes offensive to some people? Quite possibly. I mean, I didn't actually see them, and I really have no interest in, seeing his lame attempt at humor. But what was their agenda, right? Their agenda was, this is a guy who's left-wing, who's critical of Trump, who's critical of the right wing, and let's see if we can get him fired. And that's what happened. They said it was a unanimous decision from Marvel and Walt Disney to fire him. Okay, so that's what happened. This is around July 2018. So afterwards then, the Guardians cast members spoke up for him. There was like 300,000 signatures that were from fans. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote an opinion piece on this idea of cancel culture as a whole, but using this as one of his examples.
Sure. In general, anything Kareem Abdul-Jabbar writes, you should read, I would say. He's
Yeah,
So
it's you don't think about that, right away. But it was. I remember when this came out. I read it about 5 years ago, and of course, all the stars, as you said, Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, Vin Diesel, Sean Gunn, who is the brother of James Gunn, Pom Klementieff, I believe is how you say her name, Michael Rooker, Karen Gillan. They all said, we support him. We want him reinstated as the director of Volume 3 because that was just about to start production. And in fact, I think it had started production. And, the reaction was very interesting. Like some people like Dave Bautista, who I mentioned, was like, his quote on Twitter was, "It's nauseating to work for someone who'd empower a smear campaign by fascists."
Fascists is the pronunciation of that word. And the someone, if it isn't clear, is Disney, is who he's talking about. Yeah, nauseating to work for Disney, basically.
There's a really good Hollywood Reporter article, which I'll link to, which talks about everything that happened and now the new movie and how it came to be. And, Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana, but especially Chris Pratt, I think is a bit more diplomatic. Maybe that comes from his Christianity, but he's like, okay, there's a way to get this done. So he was talking with the studio. He's like, well, the script that James Gunn wrote, because he writes all his scripts, was very good. So why don't we keep his script and then you can just hire a new director? And then of course, Chris Pratt later says that's a bit of trickery, right? Because it's like, well, okay, so it's okay for you guys to use this guy's script.
Yeah. So but are you canceling him or are you not canceling him? You don't cancel his work, but you cancel him as a person? What are you really doing?
Yeah. So he knew that was going on. And then, it's funny. All these things boil down to the bottom line with regards to money and competition. Right? Because do you know what the straw that kind of broke the camel's back that allowed Marvel to rehire him?
I don't think I do.
So he was hired in mid-October 2018 to direct The Suicide Squad, which is a sequel to The Suicide Squad.
And that is a DC.
Right. Hopefully you know this. God, if you didn't. If my kids didn't know the difference between DC and Marvel, there'd be punishment time.
Punishment for yourself for being a bad father, maybe.
That's right, exactly.
But I don't think we can expect people to all know that. When you grew up, were you, as a kid, you weren't like, no, I'm DC only or I'm Marvel only?
I was DC. Were
DC. You, yeah? Because of Batman?
Yeah,
or
and the Teen Titans,
Robin,
which
in your case.
Ali introduced you to. Yes, because people recall Ali would always play Batman, so I had to play Robin when we
You didn't have to.
Played around as
you
kids.
Loved it.
Anyway, so I was more of a DC guy. My other friends were Marvel. Anyway, so it's a big thing, but the big ones are Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman are DC, Iron Man, Spider-Man, etc. Hulk are Marvel, and Guardians of the Galaxy are Marvel. So they're competing studios, right? DC is owned by Warner Brothers. And so they're like, well, we don't have a problem with this. We know DC is implying, we know this is just a smear campaign trying to discredit you. We don't have a problem with you as a person, James Gunn. So come on and direct The Suicide Squad for us. And then basically the day after that, they're like, no, you can come back and do Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So
he did both, though. He did do both. They didn't pull him off Suicide Squad.
Yeah, he did both. So that's basically what, Disney saw that, okay, now we're going to suffer. Our product is going to suffer because we're of this thing. And then they realized, okay, we didn't really have to kind of cancel
it. It was a good moment, I think, for, I guess common sense a little bit too, where it's like, look, as you said, let's first of all understand whose agenda and what their agenda, whose agenda this was to fire him and what the agenda is. And also, I think there's a lot to be said for personal growth. 10-year-old tweets from a guy who was like, I don't know, that's what comedy is to so many people. Push the envelope, challenge things, make you think. And that's why comedians in this art form say things that are edgy and profane and offensive. It is to provoke, to be provocative, to be salacious, but also to challenge and push the envelope. So
to push forward, because if not, the opposite of that, I think in comedy would be the hack jokes, the hacky jokes. Oh God, he's talking about, my mother-in-law, this really airplane food again. Who's pushing the envelope forward?
Lying in Mike Cernovich's bosom.
So, and you can see there's a couple of little trivia pieces, but they reinforce why James Gunn was so integral to this franchise. So I'll give you two examples. One is, Karen Gillan, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name.
You gave her a Gillian earlier, and I was going to correct you, but I said I'll let you flow through this.
Gillan, sorry. I was doing like a Terry Gilliam, but that's also... Or Gilligan. I mean, there's many ways.
There's many things going wrong in your mind right now. Yeah.
Yeah, or Vince Gilligan, who was creator of Breaking Bad.
Hey, why don't we abort the episode we're doing and just do
word
famous
association?
names that start with Gill? Huh?
Yeah, perfect. Oh, Vince Gill?
Vince Gill.
Johnny Gill, rub you the right way?
It's my prerogative.
No, that's Bobby Brown.
That's Bobby Brown.
Oh no.
United in
New Edition. Did you see, by the way, New Edition on New Year's Eve this year? Anyway. It wasn't worth watching. Anyway, okay. Woo, this is really going for a sidetrack. So Karen Gillan, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name, as I said, she spoke as the character Nebula when she auditioned in her Scottish accent. So she's Scottish. You guys may have seen her in the Jumanji movies, the new Jumanji movies with Dwayne Johnson. She's in those ones. And she was just, it wasn't working. So he said, okay, do Marilyn Monroe meets Clint Eastwood. That's the character. And then she switched her accent to that, so an American kind of accent.
That's exactly what she does.
Exactly what she's. My kids say that she whispers all the time. Rocket, stop doing that. Rocket. Right? Like, anyway, it's great. He's a great character. She's quite funny in this movie. And she actually takes on more of a role than Gamora does in the movie. The other interesting thing is, so this movie is really about the character of Rocket, who is a raccoon in the movie. And so he's computer generated, obviously. It's a funny thing because I don't think if James Gunn was rehired, we would have had this movie focus on Rocket, because he said when he was forced to leave, he said he was really sad because he couldn't complete this arc of Rocket, because he thinks he's very close to that character. He thinks it's very similar to himself. Because, because on the outside looking in, someone who's very gruff on the outside, but what led you to be a gruff kind of person? He's like, how could a Bugs Bunny-like character exist in the Marvel universe? How is that even possible? He said maybe he exists because he has the saddest story of all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think going back to the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I think Rocket's character was really the testament to the quality of this movie, because I saw the picture of it. I see a raccoon with a machine gun. I'm immediately disinterested. The same way I am not particularly interested in talking dragons and Game of Thrones type of stuff. Like, it just, I don't know. It's just not, it's not for me.
Yeah, the dragons don't talk in Game of Thrones. Okay.
Okay. Well, where do we have talking dragons? Wait, they don't talk? Should I watch Game of Thrones?
That was
all this time I wasted.
That was
flying dragons is what I'm trying to say, not talking dragons, for God's sake. It's just like not my, I didn't grow up playing Dungeons and Dragons. I don't have a connection to these things. And a little weird raccoon, a hybrid raccoon with a machine gun, it just, I don't know. I'm not into it. And the fact that he pulled me in within the first 15, 20 minutes, I was like, no, forget everything I thought. I kind of like this movie. I like this character. Didn't even know it was Bradley Cooper till way after I saw it.
Exactly. I didn't know that
That would have drawn me in, obviously.
And it's his brother, Sean Gunn, who on set plays the character of Rocket, and then they do the CGI on top, and then Bradley Cooper does the voice in post-production afterwards. So I think we'll get into Rocket in a second, but maybe we'll save that for the spoilers. So just one thing I want to mention before we get to the spoilers and our thought of it, and this is kind of unrelated, but it kind of wraps up this James Gunn portion. So James Gunn finished Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and then he was offered something huge, which is to be the cinematic mastermind behind the new DC Universe movies, because we all know the Marvel Cinematic Universe, very successful for billions of dollars. DC one, not as successful. There's some hits, some misses, and they haven't been able to integrate things the way that they really want to. So they basically gave him carte blanche to do whatever he wants. So some of the characters are being recast, some aren't, but the main one is Superman, and he basically wanted to do a Superman movie, but he wants to respect the movies that have been made in the past, mainly I think Christopher Reeve movies, but yet how can he do something new? So he says, very interesting, he won't make it a comedy. He's going for a sincere superhero movie. And you would think, based on James Gunn and his tweets and his old movies and even the first couple of Guardians of the Galaxy, that this would not be possible. Yeah. But it is possible based on this movie, I think.
It's interesting. For me, it's very important that I like a character in a movie. If I don't like a lead, I'm out of here. And my wife is always like, you know what? You watched 45 minutes of this. I'm like, I'm out. James Gunn is almost like a character himself now. He's become this character because of the storyline of him getting, sort of the attempts to cancel him being brought back, the love and support that was shown to him, the fact that, DC was ready to work with him. So it's almost like he's become a character. And when he talks about making this Superman, I think years ago I would have been like, I think I like the Superman in my head. I don't need to see another Superman. But it's like James Gunn's character. I'm ready to go on whatever journey James Gunn goes.
You want to see where he is going to take it, right? Exactly. Okay, so then Ali, what did you think of this movie? We'll do non-spoilers, and then we'll do a spoiler.
Can we just spoil now, for God's sake?
Well, at least let the people who haven't seen the movie know what you thought about it. Like,
I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. I almost wish I hadn't seen it in a theater. I don't think I was ready for. I wish I'd seen. No, that's wrong. I wish I'd seen 2 or 3 other movies in a theater, and then seen this.
Right, because you hadn't seen a movie in a theater in a long time.
I think it's been 3 years. So I was just too kind of like, I don't know, hyper aware of my surroundings and thinking about other things. And it just took me out of the movie a little bit, but I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And there was one thing in particular that I really liked about it. And I will mention
which we'll get to. 1 minute. Hold on. I have to say what I thought.
Allow me to say.
I really like this movie. I think
you said you loved it when I turned to you and asked as we were walking out of the theater.
I did love it.
I loved it. You're like, I loved it. As if to say, what other reaction could I possibly have to it?
Yeah, and I've seen more movies in the theater. I've probably seen at least like 8 or 9, since the pandemic, kind of things have been more relaxed. So I've seen a few more than you in the theater, so maybe I was just a bit more used to that environment, but I thought it was great. I think it's actually my second favorite Marvel movie after Black Panther.
Okay.
Which is, so again, higher than the Avengers movies.
Yeah.
So I think it was great. It's certainly one of my favorite movies I've seen so far this year. I think it was awesome. So I really do encourage people to see it, even if they think, oh, I'm not going to really like it. I didn't like the second one. Do you have to have watched the other ones to enjoy this movie? Yes and no. I think the plot is relatively clear when you're watching it, like what the stakes are and what's going on. I don't think you necessarily have to. It certainly helps if you have, but if you're tagging along with some people and you weren't sure, I think you'll find it's still a good movie because it's, again, the emotions and the message I think is pretty universal. So now, based on that, the last few minutes, we're going to start a spoiler. So spoilers now.
Is it my turn? Am I allowed to?
You can talk now. So what you can spoil it for people now who've seen the movie, who don't care about spoilers. What did you like specifically?
The greatest thing about this film was Rocket's backstory. And again, I mean, this guy is getting me to sort of feel something for these hybrid, mutated sort of animals. What is that? A baby seal or a baby walrus in a wheelchair? An otter. Of course, walrus, it was an otter. Yeah, I mean,
and there's a walrus.
How am I connecting with this? This is crazy. This is like the brilliance of James Gunn, and that story was so good. And it was like, I want more. I want to see more of this. And there were some complaints that, the evil villain was not given enough time in this movie. I can't remember the villain's name right now.
The High Evolutionary?
The High Evolutionary. That's why I can't remember it. Weird name. But I was like, that's okay. I think he got as much time as he needed and didn't need anything more because the beauty of this movie was that origin story.
Yeah, I read that too. There's also another character called Adam Warlock who's almost like, why is this person in the movie? It's like such a minor role. But it was a fun little role in it. And I think everybody gets their own time, but it's really focused on Rocket, who spends most of the movie in a coma with his friends trying to help him. And then he's flashing back to this time. So yeah, I loved it too. I thought it was amazing what they did. Again, these are all CGI creatures, but yet you feel so emotionally attached to what's going on, and it helps propel the story forward. I heard the same complaints about the High Evolutionary. Some people are like, well, he wasn't a nuanced villain. But I'm like, he's not nuanced. He is doing genetic experiments on living creatures, and torturing them. There's no nuance there. This guy, he thinks he's trying to, make evolution go forward, but he's clearly just a psychopath. So I think that's fine. I think it was great acting. That actor is also in Peacemaker, which is in the Suicide Squad movies as well. So he was great. So anyway, basically the spoiler is, of course, that the story does focus on Rocket Raccoon.
While he's in a coma.
That's right. And he does end up
maybe coming out of that coma? Who knows?
That's right. And perhaps he also figures out he actually is a raccoon at the end. Anyway, so everybody who hasn't seen it, who listened to the spoilers, definitely see it. And also let us know what you guys thought about this movie. Send us an email or a DM about that.
All right, let's kick this section off now, sweetie. Can I call you sweetie, Asif? Because we both have sort of this connection to diet sodas. I hate the way they taste. You live for diet sodas. It runs through your
Yeah, we
veins.
would have opposite views on artificial sweeteners. You basically do not want them in your body. I would say.
I would
that
say
is
there's a body thing, but honestly, if they tasted great, I would be like, all right, bring it on. But I taste the artificiality.
Okay.
And I'm like, I don't like this. And I don't drink soda on a regular basis. So when I do have it, I want a crisp, sweet, ice cold Dr. Pepper. That's what I want. I don't want a diet version of that, right? So yeah. It's a treat. It's a treat. Where you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you drink it sort of the way people would drink coffee. Diet Coke sort of like gives you a little energy.
Yeah, if you guys, I don't drink coffee, just as an FYI to people. I know I'm in medicine, I don't drink coffee, but I have like 2 Coke Zeros is actually what I prefer, okay, in case you guys want to buy me a Coke Zero sometime. I have 2 a day. So, this is why I actually ended up moving on, because I needed caffeine, because of when I was working on call and all these things, especially during residency, but I didn't really like coffee, so I switched to this. But if I had a regular Coke all the time, I'm like, well, that's not going to be good. So that was my rationale. That's how I moved into that. I never, before residency and medical school, I never drank. I was like you, have a pop every once in a while, but it wasn't something I'd consume all the time. So really, it was for the caffeine, and then of course it becoming a caffeine addiction, which can be a separate episode.
Oh yes, it can. But you enjoy the taste of these diet drinks, obviously, too.
I don't not like them. I don't not like them. I do find regular Coke or Pepsi is too sweet for me now. Like that's not that enjoyable for me to drink anymore. So
what kind of South Asian are you, dude? Huh? What kind of brown guy are you? All right, so let's talk about this article that came out about artificial sweeteners, and let's talk about what maybe the prevailing views on artificial sweeteners are, right? There's a couple of broad things. One is that it's sort of better for you than sugar. It's a better alternative. I don't know if the word healthier comes up, but a better alternative because you're not getting that sugar in you. So by extension, it's a healthier choice. And then, of course, it's been linked in our minds. Oh, sorry, there's 3 things. Healthier alternative, there's weight loss, and then there's also the dangers of aspartame and, this idea that there's rats or mice have been killed by aspartame.
Yeah, with cancer or whatever. Yeah. Exactly. So, there's many things. And the article you're referring to, we'll link to a couple of these things, but it was a WHO study that came out that basically, this was like a couple of weeks ago it came out. And so people might have heard about this, and Ollie texted to me. He's like, what's all this about? I'm like,
right.
That's an episode. Don't talk. I'm not going to tell you now on your text. I'll tell you
on a microphone. WHO also had an article about the next COVID type virus and how dangerous it's going to be. And I think that's probably one of the least read articles in all of society. And this was a good sort of substitute. Well, I'm not going to touch that one, but let's look into sweeteners. So that's right. Yeah. And,
so low calorie sweeteners have basically no or few calories, but they have a higher intensity of sweetness than things like regular sugar or corn syrup.
Can I when you say low calorie sweeteners, that's the umbrella term for all of these aspartame, stevia.
Basically. There's a few other ones we'll talk about that are similar, but stevia is a bit different, but we'll group all these low calorie sweeteners together, and we talk about stevia is slightly different. So we're talking, like, these are all the ones that have sugar-free, which is fine because that's a true statement, but diet, right? How many times have we mentioned the word Diet Coke just in this conversation, right? That's what they're trying to say. Diet Coke, right? Diet this. Yeah. And then you're implying weight loss, right? By doing this. So this is where the controversy comes in. So the ones that we've heard about is aspartame, which is like Equal or NutraSweet or Sugar Twin. That's kind of the one we've heard about the most. There's acesulfame. I don't really know what that is. That's like Sweet One. I've never heard of that. Maybe a US thing. Saccharin, which we've heard of for years. That's Sweet and Low is saccharin. Sucralose is Splenda. If I ever get something like an artificial sweetener, I usually get Splenda. There's also ones called Neotame, Advantame. Those ones I'm a bit less familiar with. And then stevia is slightly different because those are steviol glycosides that you use for stevia. It comes from a plant called the stevia plant, which is South American. And basically, we know that stevia is about 200 to 400 times sweeter than sugar. So
this is very interesting. So I'm looking at this, little chart here, and aspartame, 200 times sweeter than sugar when you compare the sweetness with sugar. And then sucralose, or the Splenda, 600 times sweeter than sugar.
Right.
But you
Exactly. So
also
maybe
just
that's
said you find Coke and Pepsi too sweet.
too
So what
sweet. I know.
gives
So
here?
it's funny. I don't know. And I think it's for me, I mean, this is just a subjective thing. I think, I think objectively it's sweeter than sugar, but subjectively, I don't know. I just, you could tell the difference between something that has real sugar in it, like when you get something with cane sugar or something like that, you could tell the difference than something that's made even with corn syrup versus one of these artificial sweeteners,
I can,
right?
sure. I don't know if everybody can, but I certainly can.
But I think we can. And then there's also sugar alcohol. So you've probably heard about these. These have less calories than table sugar, and they don't cause cavities. They don't cause a rise in blood sugar. So these are things like sorbitol and xylitol. You might have seen these. You've seen them the most in sugar-free candies that are made especially for people for diabetes or in sugar-free gum, right? Now you've seen, that's the way you've seen xylitol probably, right?
Now,
Or
these sugar
sorbitol.
alcohols, do you also find them in tequila tol and vodka tol?
I
And
don't think so. I don't believe so.
so they have no
I
alcohol
don't.
in them. This alcohol is
No, no,
removed,
no,
obviously.
no,
Okay.
no. Yeah, alcohol is it's just part of the chemical formula. Ethyl alcohol is or ethanol is the one that we drink. The other types of alcohol, like you don't get drunk with them. We put them in toothpaste. We put them in cough syrups to make cough syrup sweet, but not like sugar containing.
Shout out to Buckley's.
Yeah, there we go. I'm not sure if that has it in, but it'll be something
I
similar.
think it could use some.
And then these ones can cause loose stools and diarrhea, but they are useful for people with diabetes. If they want like a sugar substitute, like I said, sugar candies, you'll see this, or chewing gums.
What did the WHO say about loose stool? I'm curious about
No, not about no.
Okay, all right. You don't like my questions? What did the WHO say about these LCSs? Is that what we're calling them? The low
We
calorie
can call them
sweeteners?
that. I just going to call them low calorie
Low
sweeteners
cal.
because I'll just mess up the order. I'll call them LSCs and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Excellent. All right.
Too
No?
sweet, that church.
That's right. They are sweet. Actually, maybe Chris Pratt knows about that. Okay. Whew. Okay, back to this. So, okay. What they said was they do not help with weight control in the long term. So people to actually help themselves should just overall reduce their sugar intake. So reduce adding sugar to things and consume food with naturally occurring sugars like fruit, right? As opposed to like taking things with extra sugar in them. And these natural sweeteners have no nutritional value and really just overall reducing the sweetness in your life, right? The sugar in your life, that's what you should do. And the recommendation, importantly, applies to everybody except people who have diabetes, right? Because diabetes is a different situation where you probably actually should be really limiting your sugar intake and using these artificial sweeteners or those sugar alcohols more. Okay. Right?
So, I mean, there would be a case if somebody was, litigiously minded, there would be a case to say because of Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi, right? As you said, that word diet has been incredibly misleading and people have in the process.
Right. But this is where the devil's in the details, Ali. So we're going to go into a bit of detail of how they came up with this, summary statement. So they looked at a bunch of studies. So 50 of these were randomized trials. So you recall from our previous episodes, randomized trials are the most strict kind of evidence because you take a group of people who are otherwise equivalent groups and you give one of them, in this case, maybe a placebo or regular sugar, and you give one group of people a low-calorie sweetener, right? And you keep everything else constant, and you compare what happens with those people, okay? And then 97 of the studies were prospective cohort studies. So that's when you look for a risk factor in a large group of people over time, okay, and see how it impacts their outcomes. So their chance of losing weight, for example, as an outcome, and you don't make any other interventions or changes. You just kind of see what happens over time. And case control is an observational study that compares two groups of otherwise matched people, but you don't randomize them to every group. You're talking, okay, let's look at a group of people who consumes low-calorie sweeteners over time. Let's look at a group who does not and look at their weight over time. Okay? Those latter two types of studies, prospective and case control, are not as strong as a randomized trial. Okay? So now when you look at these, the randomized trials, which is the best quality of evidence, actually did see people who use artificial sweeteners had a slightly lower weight.
Come on.
But the average was 0.71 kilograms, which is Not really a lot, right? That's like 1.5 pounds.
But it's
right?
controlled, so you can't say that could be because of their lifestyle. That could be because of other things. Is that right?
Right. So you can already see the artificial sweetener companies are like, well, you're basing this on bad evidence because the best evidence studies actually say we do cause you to lose weight. Now, do we really think
like
that
one of those
0.71
companies right
kilos?
now, Asif.
I'm just telling you what they're going to say. They've already said it. But if you look at the other studies, like so the cohort studies, artificial sweeteners were associated with a higher body mass index and a 76% increased likelihood of having obesity.
Me like those studies. Down with the sweeteners.
And there was an increased risk of diabetes and developing type 2 diabetes in some of the people. Okay. So, and some studies even found an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and death. Okay.
Quite a range between those studies. Very, very different.
So the question is, why is that the case? Why would that be the case? Okay. So there's different ideas. So one thought may be, okay, if it is really causing weight gain, increased risk of diabetes, increased risk of cardiovascular disease and death, our brain responds to sweetness signals with a desire to eat more food, right? And so by providing a sweet taste with any calories, these sweeteners may be causing us to crave more sweet foods and drinks, which can add to more calories, right? Which is kind of, I think, I think that makes sense to you.
Yeah, probably, sure it does.
Right?
Sure.
I think you've thought that. I think you've even told me that, isn't this just going to make you want to have something because you think you're getting nutrition, but you're not because there's 0 calories.
Sounds just like me.
Exactly. And I tell you, shut up, man. Give me those gummy bears.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's also possible. What about this situation where, let's just take me, for example. I know based on my family history, I'm at an increased risk of developing diabetes. So what I should probably do is switch to stevia or aspartame or whatever, right? Splenda. And I'll put that. So that way, instead of like increasing my sugar, I'll decrease it. But I'm already at risk for it because the whole reason I did it was because I have a family history of diabetes, heart disease, etc. Right? So, and that's the type of thing you can't control for, right? And this is something called reverse causation, right? So again, people who are pre-diabetes start drinking these beverages to try and help control their blood sugar, and then they get diabetes and you think that was the cause. Well, it may not be the cause. So that's just one example of why you can't necessarily infer that, right?
It's a good time to remind people that there's also this other drink called water that exists.
Exactly.
I'm not sponsored by Big Water or anything, but I do have a lot of, like, as a Pakistani, as a South Asian, there's like your options are Coke or Diet Coke. And if you go, Auntie, I'll just have a glass of water. There's like shock and horror that sometimes appears in people's minds.
Totally. And I do find, I think Ali and I have spoken about this offline, is sometimes you think you're hungry and you're actually thirsty, right? The best thing you can do if you're feeling hungry is down like, a couple of full glass of water, right? And then really see, was that it? Because you're like, oh yeah, actually, because sometimes you're craving something, you go to the pantry, you're looking around like, no, actually I'm just thirsty. Just drink some water, right? So I totally agree with you on that for sure. And so the question then is, what you don't want people to say is, okay, so I'm just going to go back to having regular Coke then, right? That is not the message that the WHO is trying to convey, right? They're trying to say just lower the amount of sugar overall.
Right. And tell me about this, what do you want to call it, a prevailing notion or conventional thought that aspartame also caused these cancers and had these effects on
Yeah. So let's talk about aspartame in a second, because the main one was saccharin, which has been around for longer, right? And saccharin, so there was this study, which was the Saccharin Study and Labeling Act of 1977, where the FDA, based on their review of some evidence, wanted saccharin containing products to have this could be hazardous to your health type label on it, right? Because it could cause cancer in laboratory animals. And I've heard of this for years, because not just you, other people, artificial sweeteners, as you know, they cause cancer.
Right, but why did the FDA want that? What was the FDA going off?
Exactly. By the way, I'll tell you guys a really good rule of thumb. There's so many class action lawsuits out there. If something was convincingly proven to cause cancer or cause anything, there would be lawsuits about it, right? Like, that's why you always see ads on TV, usually on like cable news shows on the weekend, about mesothelioma, right? Yeah. If you have mesothelioma because it's clearly caused by asbestos and asbestos mining, like that is the number one cause of it. So if you were exposed to that in your workplace, you have a lawsuit on your hands because it's clearly shown.
But also, if you've seen those commercials, you probably need to go to bed, right? That's a very late night.
Oh,
Sad
you know what?
viewing.
I meant Sunday afternoon.
Oh, is it?
Shows, but
Okay.
anyway,
Okay.
yeah, but I didn't think I said late night news shows. But anyway, whatever. Let's move on. So, okay, you're asking me the question about this cancer connection. Okay, so basically, they looked at 20 studies of laboratory rats given high doses of saccharin. Okay, lab rats, not humans, and none of them had an increase in bladder cancer, except for one rat type, which is bred to have a higher incidence of bladder infection because that's what it's bred for. So you could use it in experiments to test out bladder infections, risk of bladder cancer, etc. So that was it. And that was the only study that suggested that. So lab rats, one strain of rats, the other rats didn't get it.
So the
eventually
FDA
in
was going
2000,
off of that study.
exactly.
And
So
society in general still remembers this thing from the late 70s.
Exactly. Because again, this is what's publicized, right? So in 2000, saccharin warning labels were removed. In 2001, it was declared safe for consumption. In 2010, the EPA in the States, the Environmental Protection Agency, said it's not considered a hazard to human health. Again, listen, I'm not dumb. I know there was probably years of lobbying going on, right, by the artificial
I was just
sweetener
about to say
community.
that. Yeah, exactly.
But you were asking me about aspartame, right? So I was kind of taking a digression there. So there was a suggestion about an increased rate of brain tumors, but basically large studies which looked at this did not find this correlation. A small study which suggested that maybe there's an increased rate of people who have, as areas have increased rates of having low calorie sweeteners like aspartame, they have increases of brain tumors, but they didn't actually look into whether people who had brain tumors had increased ingestion of aspartame. So that's why bigger studies really kind of found that wasn't really the case. So sucralose, there's no evidence for. Neotame and advantame, there wasn't. But there was a more recent study called the Nutrinet Santé study, I believe done in France, Santé. And they looked at cancer incidence for 100,000 adults. And they also reviewed their dietary records, and they estimated the artificial sweeteners from them, and they followed them up for about 8 years. So a pretty large study. And they did find that people who consumed artificial sweeteners were more likely to develop cancer than those who didn't consume artificial sweeteners. But the amount was about 1.13 times more likely. So, that's not really a lot. It's a slight increase over the baseline population.
It's not good for your santé, I'll tell you that much.
There we go. And so, but again, and they even controlled for obesity, right? Because there's some cancers are very linked to obesity. We talked about breast cancer before, or ovarian cancer. These ones are linked to obesity. So they factored that in, and they said, no, even if you factor that in, that wasn't it. But it's still, again, these are just what we call epidemiological cohort studies. So you still can't say, again, maybe these people who had artificial sweeteners, the rest of their lives were unhealthy, right? They had many risk factors. They smoked, they drank, they had a sedentary lifestyle, they had a family history of cancer. They're like, well, the only thing I can do is maybe convert to artificial sweeteners, right? We don't know if that's what happened. So I think that study maybe suggests that there may be something there, but like most of the big studies have said that there's no risk. So overall, and this is what the WHO said, that there is no convincing evidence that artificial sweeteners are associated with differences in overall cancer rates or premature death from cancer.
So it was really about the weight loss and not about anything else. But I will say, I listened to somebody recently talking about how his vision is of, these companies that make ultra refined foods. You know what I'm talking about? Stuff that's not really food. That we should be holding them accountable by obliging them to put labels on the food, warning labels, akin to what cigarette companies started doing decades ago or were forced to do. And I think from my perspective, it's like, just so the takeaway here for our listeners isn't like, oh, have a Diet Coke, it's not a big deal. I think it's like genetically, I don't think we're designed to take in a regular soda, like, the same guy was saying, if you took the sugar that's in a Coke and you poured that sugar onto a plate, that amount of, if you saw it, right, you would never eat that much sugar. You just never do it, but it's disguised in Coke as though it's fine. But then all these sweeteners, the key word being artificial, this is not stuff that we are genetic. If I look at my friends, South Asian and West Indian, and so many of them have lactose intolerance, genetically, their parents and grandparents weren't, their bodies weren't they never got used to having milk. I think, we can probably say the same thing for all of these low calorie sweeteners.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think people should minimize these for sure, especially because if you're trying to use them for weight loss, there's laws suggesting that it doesn't work. But more importantly, like we said, just decrease your overall amount of sugar, especially with ultra refined foods, right? As the WHO says, if you're going to consume sugar, just consume it with naturally occurring sugars, like fruit. So, you know what this means? An apple a day.
Yes. Keeps Asif Doja away. And we should probably wrap up because I'm sure all this talk about artificial sweeteners has got you thinking about opening a Diet Coke right now. And I don't want to
I just had one before.
You had one before the podcast. Okay.
That's our episode for today. Let us know what you guys thought about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Reach out to us. Also, let us know what you guys thought about artificial sweeteners. Do you use them? Do you not use them? What did you think about the WHO statement and their study that was done? Reach out to us, Dr. V Comedian, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are everywhere. drvcomedian@gmail.com. Ali, do you got anything going on for June? We're talking June
We're
now.
talking June. What do I got? I'm going to be, a little bit of here and a little bit of there. But, I'm going to zig and I'm going to zag. But mostly staying put. We are filming Sort of in June. And for those of you who don't know the show Sort of, we had Bilal Baig, who is the lead character, Sabi, on this show. And this show is a Peabody award-winning show. Fantastic. We're filming season 3, which is why I have to grow in a mustache and channel some real acting. No more mailing it in, Asif. We're going to have to do some real acting this month. So that's what I'm focused on. Yeah.
Exciting. And remember that although I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor. Medical issues, we talk about it for your interest and information only, and they're not medical advice. Please consult your medical professionals for actual medical advice. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.